translate some things. Now, I could pick plenty of languages to demonstrate this with, Chinese, Swahili, Arabic, but I decided to make a completely objective decision and go with the most studied language in the US that isn't European, Japanese, in a decision which I promise has absolutely nothing to do with the fact that literally everyone I hang out with is an anime nerd. Moving on, there are a lot of things that make Japanese really different from most European languages, but what I want to talk about today is how it's pragmatically different. Pragmatics as a subfield of linguistics is a little bit difficult to define, but I think it's really helpful to compare it with semantics. Both semanticists and pragmaticists study what language means, but semanticists tend to look at what a word or set of words mean all on their own, as if they exist in some sort of alternate language dimension, floating in a vacuum. Pragmatists, on the other hand, study what a language means in context. How what someone says combines with the shared knowledge between the speakers, their relative social status, their personal relationship, their immediate physical surroundings, everything that's been said previously in the conversation, how all of that meshes together in order to create the information that actually winds up getting communicated. Like, one of the most basic ways that what we say combines with what isn't said is in the use of pronouns. The word they doesn't really mean anything on its own besides an unspecified person, but when we actually use it, it usually means someone very specific, and we're supposed to know who based on all kinds of contextual clues. Words that do this, that take on the meaning of whatever we need them to for the conversation, are called deictic expressions, or indexicals. But Japanese even treats basic pragmatic things like indexicals differently. Notice how a lot of our indexicals come in pairs of two based on how close they are to the speaker. Here, there, this, that, now, then. Like, we sort everything into things that are close to the speaker and things that are far away from the speaker. Japanese, on the other hand, makes a three-way distinction instead. Kore and kono describe things that are close to the speaker. Sore and sono describe things that are close to the listener. And finally, are and ano describe things that are far away from both of them. Now, although we don't make this same three-way distinction in English, it's actually not all that strange for European languages as a whole, and English might actually have used to have the same three-way distinction in the form of here, there, and yonder. But you know what Japanese does that's way more weird and foreign? The wa-ga distinction. The difference between these two words is notoriously confusing and difficult to explain, and I barely understand it myself. But that hasn't stopped me from trying to explain stuff before, so here I go. Just maybe make sure you have annotations turned on in case I want to make any corrections later. Japanese uses certain words to mark what role something is playing in the sentence. Ga marks the subject of the sentence, o marks the direct object of the sentence, ni marks the indirect object, no marks possession, and so on. The word that makes things tricky is the word wa, which marks the topic. What is the topic, you ask? Good question. Very, very good question. Okay. So, the topic is just sort of generally the thing we're talking about. Very often, the same topic will span multiple sentences, so it's probably not just the topic of the sentence, but more like the topic of discussion in general. Now, a lot of the time, the topic will actually overlap with one of the grammatical categories I mentioned before, in which case it can be very confusing which one to use. Paradoxically, if you want to emphasize the subject of the sentence, you should probably use the normal subject marker, ga, rather than wa, because even though calling something the topic makes it sound really big